hearing about this. We were starting hearing about China, and it sent, everyone's interest up.
The government was repatriating some flights from around the world and some patients on cruise ships that were off the coast in San Diego. And I remember that's when we realized it's in San Diego and it's coming here.
Case rates rising, local health officials are pushing the state to consider other data points.
She's on the front line, face to face with coronavirus.
The sound of the ICU at Sharp Chula Vista Medical Center carries all the way to the elevator.
Looks into it in our ongoing series about the county's COVID data.
There was this realization that this is happening. This is really going to happen to us.
It was just the room right over there, and I saw the patient. It was the first time I actually connected and thought, okay, there it is. COVID is real.
He's requiring some blood pressure up as well.
It went from a news story and something I'd read about to real life. Someone was really sick in our hospital with this unknown, novel, deadly disease. And I think the realization for me is, and we all might get it too.
And it was a boogeyman. We didn't know what this was. We didn't know if this was going to kill us.
It was something surreal because as a physician, you hear about it, you read about it, but it's not something that you would think that it would happen to you. Being in practice over 20 years, I've seen everything, but nothing as a pandemic worldwide.
It was a tidal wave of patients with respiratory failure, completely unprecedented in the modern era. All of the years of my training and experience have, in a way, prepared us for dealing with the disease process. Nothing could prepare you for the quantity and the amount of critical care that we had to do.
Before the pandemic, there was a lot of cars, a lot of people outside in the street. And I remember in one time that going to work and there was nobody. It was like a crazy movie that was going through our community. And I remember that I actually decided to use my bicycle to go to work. And it was incredible because there was no cars at all.
I just remember the night shift briefing us, and they said, move slowly, make your movements intentional where you're touching, because we didn't know how infectious this was going to be.
We were converting units and taking units that had taken care of surgical patients. Now they were shelled in as COVID units.
What is this? How does it spread? What effect does it have on people? What effect does it have on pregnant women? We were canceling a lot of what we called elective surgery, so things that could possibly be postponed to a later time. But labor and delivery is not elective. You don't elect when you're gonna have a baby or when a high-risk complication happens.
We didn't know how transmissible it was and what we needed to do to protect everyone in our hospital. And one of the first things we set up was an area to see patients outside so that they wouldn't come back into the emergency department.
We had to build a physical space in our ER that was separate from our regular patients. We had to move them separate from each other so that the COVID patients weren't interacting with the non-COVID patients.
We called in a company to do that, and it was actually a party rental company, so they put something down called the dance floor. I was naive, and I kept telling our team, as soon as this is over, probably in a few weeks, we're gonna have a big party. I'm gonna get a disco ball and just to celebrate the end of COVID. At the time, I didn't realize our biggest challenges were still yet to come. I describe it as like waiting for a tidal wave. Before a tidal wave, the water goes out and it looks like everything's fine and calm. And that's how we felt in the emergency room, is just the calm before the storm.
We had our first case and the physicians that were there were scared.
But March 14th was like D-Day.
So within a few days from seeing a few cases, a week later, it doubled, it tripled, and all of a sudden, we had an emergency room that about 70% were COVID cases.
We realized that we were getting into the storm.
Sharp Reese Steely is now rolling out outdoor respiratory centers to help those suffering significant symptoms from coronavirus.
We tapped into everyone to get logistics, supply chain, everything we needed to get the outdoor respiratory clinics up and running.
You had to always be like one step ahead or you will like 15 steps behind.
After an extraordinary effort, Friday morning, March 27th, 8 a.m., we were fully open to take care of patients.
Everybody was all hands on deck, ready to help. What can I do to make this happen, Cherie?
In the first 8 months, we assessed and treated over 90,000 patients with respiratory illness and caught patients early in the course of their illness before they overwhelmed the hospital emergency departments.
These guys went into those tents and took care of people who had a disease that potentially could kill them or that they could take it home, and they were brave and they were amazing.
How's it going? I'll be taking care of you. We're gonna do a study.
We realized one of us might get sick. We realized the death rate was high. We knew every day when you put on your PPE that you could walk in and see a patient and inadvertently contract COVID. It was frightening, and despite that, we still provided the care. And to this day, I'm amazed at how much we did.
They would drive up in their cars to the entrance of the ER and say, I have a cough. And within hours, they couldn't breathe. They were on all our mechanics trying to help them to get to breathe. And when we looked like we were Martians.
We ended up in these powered air purifying respirators, these PAPR devices, which is basically a big hood, like a biohazard hoods we're wearing around now. Having to don and doff, put on and take off all of the layers of protective equipment and not break any sterility while doing that is very hard to do. Can you even imagine being a patient when COVID first hit? Nobody knows what this is, and your doctor walks in, nurse, doctor, everybody walks in, as you're laying there and is looking at you through these biohazard masks. Like, what do I have? Or what am I exposed to? And it just makes the simple things hard and the hard things near impossible.
When we realized what COVID was and how sick patients were going to get, we quickly took a look at our critical care medications. There was a big concern about the availability of medications we use in the intensive care setting and in our emergency departments. So our logistics team came together and we produced a list of what are the critical medications that are needed for our patients in intensive care. And we did see some shortages. We saw some drugs that were needed, and very quickly we came up with several iterations of if you run out of drug A, then you use drug B. If you, God forbid, ran out of drug B, then you could use drug C. So there was a lot of work and coordination that went into making sure that we had a plan before any of that happened.
The earliest severely ill patient I've seen is Don, a young man in his 30s who came down with COVID-19 and developed fairly rapidly severe multi-system illness, including respiratory failure.
I was like, what? Wait, what's going on,
He was nervous and scared, I would say, because he can't have his family there with him.
He was somebody who was doing okay and then got sick really, really quick. He needed all the advanced therapies.
Your lungs is failing. We have to put you to sleep and intubate you.
It was probably 3 weeks or 4 weeks before he really showed us that he was going to eventually recuperate.
It gives me goosebumps even talking about it now. Just to see him from intubation to extubation to getting out of the ICU, someone who's my age, it's scary. It could happen to anybody.
The nurse told me, you didn't know you were sleeping for 18 days. And I was very, very shocked at that point. And I actually grabbed my phone. I look at my phone, and all the news that I saw on my phone is about COVID, 100,000 cases, thousands of deaths in New York, COVID. Everything is about COVID.
This isn't something that's a single disaster that affected one community on Earth. It affected the entire globe. It felt like everyone, at least what I saw, came out on the balcony and they were banging things and making noise, and I had to ask someone, what is this? Oh, it's for healthcare. It's healthcare heroes. I'm like, oh my God.
It was this calamity of things going on simultaneously. And then eventually we hit our stride. We figured out, relatively quickly, okay, this is how we're doing this. This is how we're going. And then we kind of got used to it, kind of.
We reached the point of 300 beds that we have at approximately at Sharp Chula Vista, 2/3, 200 cases we had at one moment. Intubate the patient and take it from there. It's a rule of COVID. Yeah. So we have the hardest part about COVID is that these patients basically, they drown in their lungs. In other words, they die because they can't breathe. These patients sometimes would go where one day they were very good and then the next day they would die. So it was very hard to be able to predict how this illness was going to respond.
I cannot even explain to you what it feels like when a patient grabs your hand and just tells you, like, please take care of me, please make sure I don't die, please pray for me.
Estaban todos los doctores allí y me dijeron, ya no tienes oxígeno, no sirve de nada que te estemos poniendo el oxígeno y lo que tenemos que hacer es sacarte el coma, entubarte, para que te pueda ayudar a tus pulmones y puedas salir.
Al momento que ya estabas, cuando lo entubaron, cuando ya entró a cuidados intensivos, ahí es cuando hay una reacción. Esto es grave. Esto no es cualquier cosa, es el COVID. El COVID te mata.
Esto es lo que tenemos que hacer nosotros. Esto es lo último que podemos hacer. Lo demás depende de Dios. Y le dije, está bien.
The most important part for us was to make sure that there was somebody there, that they knew that there was somebody there with them, that it was okay, that they were not alone, that their loved ones were thinking of them, and that their loved ones, even though they wanted to be there, we were there in their place.
Yo lo describo y siempre platico, le digo a mi esposa, le digo que ese hospital está lleno de ángeles.
But some of these patients that were like in bed for a month and they woke up after being extubated and they couldn't move. And the first time that they sit up at the edge of the bed, I think it probably, I don't have any children, but it probably feels like when your kid takes those first steps. Like, it's so amazing. It makes every single bad moment worth it. It makes every single day that you are crying after work because the shift was so hard, or it makes every single time that somebody that you, no matter what you did, passed away, it makes everything worth it.
Y el ver que todos se pusieron en las paredes, todos así en el hospital, enfermeras y enfermeros, todos, y una enfermera iba cantando una canción, no me acuerdo cuál era, y todos me iban dando palmas de que había salido pues victorioso, de haber estado en un lecho de muerte, había salido otra vez, una vez más a la vida. Ese fue un momento especial.
This moment just gives us hope to come in every day, for the staff, for everybody to be together. And we know that we can do this. And it's just hope from here on out.
Ahorita siento frío, siento escalofríos de pensar todo lo que vivimos, todo lo que estuvimos pensando.
We were so fortunate. We had nurses that were labor and delivery nurses and worked at the Mary Birch Hospital for Women came over to help in our COVID unit. And normally they're in a NICU, or normally they're helping a woman deliver a baby as part of their job. And now they're being assigned to a COVID unit.
We had to learn, things that we don't do on a daily basis. And while we're used to taking care of this very vulnerable population that relies on us 100%, that's, very similar to people that were just compromised, were relying on us 100% for all of their needs. When we would hear a code called that we knew were designated COVID floors, your heart just broke, and you just knew, and everybody would just be silent and look at each other and just, gosh, every time we would hear it, and it was very often, we would get chills and we would want to do something.
Healthcare workers went into this field because they care about others, they want to make a difference, they want to help people. Healthcare's always been recognized as a high-stress job. The pandemic intensified the mental health challenges. That has an impact on who we are, how we're able to perform our job and be the best version of ourselves, both with our team members and in the care that we're providing.
Everybody that came back was glowing, was just this feeling of, I felt so needed, I felt so appreciated. It was the saddest and scariest day of my life, but the most rewarding.
I'm a marathon runner, something I do on my days off, something I've always liked to do. I feel like it's helped me with this because in the marathon distance, you have to ration out your energy, and in a situation where you feel like it's never gonna end, but it will. And I could get my mindset in that mode of, this is a marathon, this isn't a sprint.
When COVID hit, we realized that one of the primary therapies at the end of the game, at the end of the day, when the patient's lungs just won't recover, and you're a day or two away from losing the oxygenation to their vital organs or to their brain, and they're gonna go into multi-organ failure and maybe go brain dead. The last option is to put these patients onto ECMO.
Eli came to us sick with COVID-19.
And I said, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? And he's all like, you have COVID and you have pneumonia. So both of your lungs are just, they're just bad.
I literally went back and parked outside, and I'm like, they're gonna call me and they're gonna tell me, come get me, or he's gonna say, hey, come get me. And they did call me, but it was to let me know that he was staying.
The last time I saw him.
He was very severely affected, and we treated him with high doses of sedation, high levels of support from the mechanical ventilator.
The intubation just wasn't enough for my lungs. My lungs were completely collapsed.
Everybody's doing what they can, but now I need a miracle. That's the way I saw it. I need a miracle.
He was progressing to a very severe state of respiratory failure that would potentially benefit from ECMO, or extracorporeal membrane oxygenation.
ECMO is a device that takes blood out of a patient's body, passes it through a heart-lung bypass machine, oxygenates the blood, and then sends it back into the patient. All the lungs have to do is the job of healing. When we're trying to recover an ECMO COVID patient, is do various things to sort of shake that fluid out. We'll prone them, we'll turn them in different directions. We're trying to shake up that fluid, get that fluid to come out. Once that fluid barrier is gone, the lungs can do what they're supposed to do, which is gas exchange, and then we can take the ECMO off. COVID is a beast. It is really hard to recover those patients. And as soon as we can, we get the cannulas out of them and get them off the ECMO. That's just the whole process of recovering any patient who's suffered such a devastating disease.
So it's a last attempt at saving a patient's life. In Eli's case, it did.
Seeing my son running towards him and him picking him up, that was just like, wow, he's coming home, he's coming home after 58 days and being through everything he's been through, he's coming home.
Through COVID, a nurse is no longer just a nurse. They had to be a nurse and the family because families weren't allowed to be at the bedside. And so our nurses have been there to hold their hand. They've been there to support them. They've cried with them. They've been there to sit with them in the middle of the night when they're worried or needed someone to talk to. And even in some of the saddest cases, as patients have unfortunately died from this COVID and from this virus, our nurses were their family holding their hands, making sure that someone was at their side at their very last moment.
I've had to almost compartmentalize myself a little bit because if I get very emotional every single time, then I wouldn't be able to come and do my job.
And there's times where we all just sit and deal by ourselves when it's quiet, and things will bubble up from your life, your work life, that just sometimes you can't hold it down anymore, and you just cry it out or talk it out, whatever it is. But we all do that. I mean, this is a dramatic business. This is a lot of emotion, a lot of stuff that you just deal with moment to moment to moment. And I have to say, we have never had anyone go where we haven't felt we threw everything at them possible. But there's just some times that we're not enough.
It is very tough. Seeing these patients pass. And we've seen many pass over the last 2 years. Too many. Too many have passed.
Is still on to find a viable coronavirus vaccine. San Diego, as you might know, has been ground zero for biotech companies working on a cure.
As the White House pushes for a COVID-19 vaccine by early November.
And these vaccine trials aren't quick, lasting about 8 weeks for 2 injections.
The wait could soon be over for San Diegans to start getting the COVID-19 vaccine.
As shipments of the first COVID-19 vaccine begin arriving across the country, it's almost Sharp's turn to do the honor of unboxing their own batch.
Around the 18th of December, we knew we were only getting a limited quantity. We got just over 17,000 doses of Pfizer vaccine at that time. And we wanted to get it in the arms of our elderly patients, our healthcare workers, and we were very cognizant of every single dose.
That's the stuff. That's the liquid gold.
It was an incredible, beautiful moment.
It was really exciting for me, Dr. Smith, to be able to do this. To be able to give the first dose to somebody who's really on the front line, making sure all of our employees are cared for and our patients are cared for in the community. Yeah.
Being a Latino, we love to get together. We like to celebrate. We love to hug and kiss. During the pandemic, we couldn't do that. It was very hard. But we reached a moment in time that my whole family was vaccinated. We were able to get together. And we reached that point that I was able to take off my mask, kiss my mom, hug her, and it was an incredible joy. We were crying because it was very exciting to be able to do that.
Sharp has a large presence in San Diego, and we're responsible for people's health care. So we really thought it was very important for us to get out and begin community vaccination. I remember having a discussion with the County of San Diego, talking about, how much vaccine we could actually get, and the county was thrilled with the thought that we could be doing 1,000 shots a day. And we opened our first site. The very first day, hundreds of people showed up. At one point, we were positioned among all of our sites to do more than 10,000.
Sharp Chula Vista was the most impacted hospital in San Diego County, if not in Southern California. I mean, the case rates were extraordinarily high, but South Bay got vaccinated to a high degree early on, and we saw their numbers drop to the point where, for example, here in Sharp Memorial, we exceeded their numbers after a while. And that's empiric evidence that the vaccine works.
And so every day when I get home, my youngest son's like, "Did you save the people?" That's the question I get. "Did you save the people?" I said, I try to save the people.
It doesn't matter what's happening. You have a job to do, and your job is to take care of people. irrespective of what else is going on. You're there, you have the knowledge, you have the expertise, and your job is to provide care, and that's what you do.
As much as we've learned, there's so much more to learn. And I think that will be our asset, is that we will gain knowledge about this virus and how to treat it.
I also feel like we have this camaraderie that we've been through something that was big, and that'll forever unite us. And it'll be those that made it through that and those that are just hearing about it. And then eventually it'll become history and in history books and something that only the old people like me in a little bed somewhere will tell stories to young 3 generations down, new little nurses and doctors.
Being an emergency doctor during a global pandemic was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Now, if I see this in time, sometimes I feel like it's a blur. You feel that, like, what happened? What happened in the world? What happened to me? And in a way, it's been a blur, but where you want to forget things. You want to forget what you saw. But at the same token, I can tell you this is something that is going to be in my mind for the rest of my life, that I was in a pandemic.
I received so many nice notes and thank yous. Those cards mean the world to me.
My friends and family would ask me, "Are you scared?" And I just would say, "No, it's been the honor of my life." And I mean that sincerely, because I've been able to be here for this amazing team, for this hospital, and for our community. And it's an honor and a privilege that I will never forget, and I'm glad to be here.